I was cheated on for the sake of content, publicly shamed by my fiancée, and left to pick up the pieces. But in the end, I found real love beyond the screens. They say the internet never forgets, but what they don't tell you is how it remembers all the wrong things. 3 years ago, I thought I was proposing to the love of my life at a charming farmer's market, surrounded by autumn leaves and the scent of fresh flowers. Instead, I became a viral meme overnight, the clueless boyfriend whose romantic gesture was so cringe it deserved public mockery from millions of strangers. 2.3 million views later, I learned that some betrayals cut deeper than infidelity. Some betrayals don't just break your heart, they shatter your faith in everything you thought you knew about love, trust, and the person sleeping next to you every night. This is the story of how I discovered that the woman I planned to marry had been planning my public humiliation for months. Looking back now, with the clarity that only comes from surviving something you never thought you could, I can see all the signs I chose to ignore. But when you're 29 and convinced you've found your person, you explain away the red flags with the devotion of a defense attorney protecting a guilty client. You become an expert at rationalization, a master of benefit of the doubt giving, a PhD in making excuses for someone else's inexcusable behavior. Emma was everything I thought I wanted, wrapped up in a package I definitely couldn't afford. Smart, beautiful, ambitious. A social media influencer with a growing following who could make even a mundane trip to the grocery store look like a carefully curated lifestyle magazine shoot. We'd been together for 3 years, living in our cozy apartment with exposed brick walls and oversized windows that caught the morning light just right for her Instagram stories. I was completely, hopelessly, stupidly in love with her curated version of perfection. She had this way of moving through the world like she was constantly being photographed, which, as it turned out, she basically was. Every gesture was deliberate, every outfit was strategic, every facial expression was practiced until it looked effortless. I thought it was confidence. I thought it was just her being naturally photogenic. I had no idea I was dating someone who literally never stopped performing. I should have known something was wrong when she started filming everything we did together. Every dinner date became a flat lay of artfully arranged plates and carefully positioned wine glasses. Every lazy Sunday morning became a series of candid shots of us reading in bed, which required no less than 47 takes to achieve the perfect level of fake spontaneity. Every random Tuesday evening became content for her platforms, narrated with that breathy, conspiratorial voice that influencers use when they want you to feel like their best friend. People love authentic relationship moments, she'd say, phone perpetually in hand, capturing our life in 15-second clips that would be edited, filtered, and captioned to within an inch of their artificial lives. I thought it was cute how passionate she was about her work. I thought it showed dedication and entrepreneurial spirit. Now I know that authenticity was the absolute last thing she was interested in. Everything was content, everything was performance, everything was material for the Emma show, and I was just a supporting character who didn't even know he was on camera. The proposal had been planned for months with the kind of meticulous attention to detail that would have made a wedding planner weep with joy. I'd saved up for her dream ring. Well, mostly saved up. My grandmother's diamond was the centerpiece, a gorgeous stone that had been on her finger for 62 years of marriage, but I'd had it reset in a modern white gold band that Emma had favorited in some high-end jewelry store's Instagram post. She'd shown me the ring approximately 37 times, usually late at night when she thought I was asleep, but was actually memorizing every detail of what she claimed was just browsing. I'd chosen the location carefully, the farmer's market where we'd had our first date, beneath the same flower stall where I'd bought her sunflowers, and she'd laughed at my nervous rambling about seasonal produce and how I definitely didn't know the difference between organic and locally sourced. It was the place where she'd first smiled at me like I might be worth keeping around, where she'd let me buy her terrible coffee from. A vendor who clearly didn't know what he was doing, where we'd sat on a bench and talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. The autumn was perfect for it. There's something about that season that makes everything feel like a beginning, rather than an ending, you know? The leaves were changing colors, like nature was throwing a celebration just for us. There was that crisp bite in the air that made you want to pull your person closer, and Emma had been dropping hints about engagement for weeks, subtle hints like a brick through a window. "When are you finally going to make me an honest woman?" she'd tease, usually while scrolling through other people's engagement announcements with the kind of casual envy that should have been a warning sign. And I'd just smile and change the subject, my secret burning bright and warm in my chest like a coal I was carefully tending until it was time to let it burst into flames. But even in those final weeks leading up to the proposal, something felt fundamentally off in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. Emma had become distant in this weird, calculated way, not like she was pulling away from me, but like she was studying me from behind a one-way mirror. She was constantly checking her phone, even more than usual, which was saying something since her phone was basically a surgical extension of her hand. She developed this new habit of making sarcastic, cutting comments about other couples we knew, particularly the ones getting engaged or married. "Look at this basic proposal," she'd say, showing me some friend's announcement with barely concealed contempt. "A beach at sunset? How completely original." Or she'd scroll through engagement photos and point out everything wrong with them. "The ring is too small, the location is overdone, his outfit is tragic." She looked surprised, but you can tell she knew it was coming. Most disturbing was her obsession with proposal fails and cringe compilations. She'd send me TikToks of guys being rejected, proposals gone wrong, elaborate romantic gestures that backfired spectacularly. "Can you imagine being this guy?" she'd say, showing me some poor bastard who'd tried to propose at a baseball game only to have his girlfriend shake her head and walk away. The secondhand embarrassment is killing me. I convinced myself it was just pre-engagement nerves, the kind of anxiety that makes people criticize others as a way of working through their own fears. Maybe she was stressed about her follower count, which had plateaued recently despite her increasingly desperate attempts to create viral content. Maybe she was worried about the pressure and expectations that come with marriage. Maybe she was just having a rough patch with her mental health, which would be completely understandable given the pressure of maintaining a perfect online persona 24 hours a day. I made excuses because that's what you do when you love someone deeply and completely. You protect them from your own doubts. You give them the benefit of every possible doubt. You explain away the things that don't make sense, because the alternative, that the person you're planning to spend your life with might not be who you think they are, is too terrifying to contemplate. The morning of the proposal, I woke up with my stomach twisted into knots so tight I could barely eat breakfast. I'd been planning this day for months, had every detail mapped out, had backup plans for my backup plans, but I was still nervous as hell. This was it. This was the moment that would change everything, that would transform us from boyfriend and girlfriend into fiancés, that would officially start our journey toward becoming husband and wife. Emma was already up when I stumbled into the kitchen, which was unusual for a Saturday morning. She was usually the type to sleep until noon on weekends, claiming she needed her beauty rest for optimal content creation. But there she was at 8 a.m., hair perfectly styled in those effortless-looking waves that I knew took her 45 minutes to achieve, makeup flawlessly applied, in that no-makeup look that somehow required more products than full glamour, dressed in an outfit that looked casual but was probably worth more than my car payment. "You look beautiful," I said, meaning it completely. Even with all her artifice and calculation, Emma was genuinely stunning. That was part of what made her so dangerous. She was beautiful enough to make you overlook everything else. She just shrugged, checking her reflection in her phone camera for the 1,000th time. I always look good for important occasions. At the time, I thought she meant the engagement photos I'd secretly arranged with a photographer friend of mine. I thought she'd somehow figured out my plan and was making sure she looked perfect for our special moment. Now I know she meant something entirely different. She was dressing for her audience, preparing for her performance, getting ready to document the content opportunity of a lifetime. The proposal itself was perfect, at least in my memory of it. We walked through the market, hand in hand, stopping at familiar stalls, sharing an apple cider that I was too nervous to actually taste. I was carrying the ring box in my jacket pocket, and I swear it felt like it was glowing hot enough to burn through the fabric. Every time Emma looked at me, I was certain she could see my secret written across my face in neon letters. When we reached the flower stall, the same one where we'd met, I felt like I might actually throw up from nervousness. This was it. This was the moment I'd been planning and dreaming about for months. I took a deep breath, dropped to one knee beside the sunflower display, and pulled out the ring box with hands that were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. The words I'd practiced for weeks tumbled out in a rush of nervous energy and genuine emotion. I told her I loved her, that I wanted to spend the rest of my life making her happy, that she was my person and my home and my future, all rolled into one perfect, complicated, beautiful package. I told her about resetting my grandmother's ring because I wanted her to have something that represented both our future and our family history. I told her I couldn't imagine my life without her in it. Emma gasped and covered her mouth with her hands in what looked like genuine surprise and joy. Tears welled up in her eyes, real tears that I could see even through her carefully applied mascara. She said yes through what appeared to be overwhelming emotion, and I slipped the ring onto her finger with a sense of completion and rightness that I'd never felt before. But the very first thing she said after I slipped the ring on her finger, the first words out of her mouth after yes, were, "Did you get it on video?" I laughed it off, riding high on adrenaline and relief and pure joy. Of course she'd want to document this moment. It was the biggest day of our lives so far. The photographer I'd hired was capturing everything from a discreet distance, and I figured that's what she meant. She was just excited to have this memory preserved forever. There was nothing wrong with wanting to commemorate the most important moment of our relationship, but there was something about the way she said it, something calculating and cold that didn't quite match the tears on her cheeks or the trembling in her voice. It was like watching someone remember they were supposed to be acting happy rather than actually feeling happy. But I was so caught up in my own emotions, so relieved that she'd said yes, so excited about our future, that I brushed aside the weird feeling and focused on celebrating. The next 48 hours were some of the strangest of my life, though I didn't understand why at the time. Emma seemed genuinely excited about the ring. She kept taking photos of it from different angles, posting Instagram stories about how blessed and grateful she felt, showing it off to anyone who would look. But she seemed oddly distant about the actual engagement, about what it meant for our relationship and our future. Every time I brought up calling our families or making announcements to our friends, she'd deflect or postpone. "Let's just keep this between us for a little while," she said when I suggested telling my parents. "I want to savor it before everyone else gets involved and it becomes this whole big thing." I thought it was romantic. I thought she wanted to protect our special moment from the outside world, to have a little bubble of time where it was just ours before we had to start planning and dealing with other people's opinions and expectations. I had no idea she was buying time to execute her real plan. She became glued to her phone in a way that was unusual even for someone whose entire career depended on social media engagement. Secret conversations that she'd pause when I walked into the room, screens that she'd turn away from me, and that little secret smile she got when she was crafting the perfect caption for maximum engagement. When I asked what she was working on, she'd just say she was planning something special for her platforms. "I want to announce our engagement in a really unique way," she explained when I caught her filming herself in our bathroom mirror for the third time that day. "Something that will really resonate with my audience and show them how authentic and real our love is." I should have known then. I should have recognized the language she was using. Resonate with my audience, authentic and real, unique way. These weren't the words of someone planning to share happy news with friends and family. These were the words of someone planning a marketing campaign. 3 days after the proposal, my coworker Jake approached my desk with the kind of uncomfortable expression people get when they have to deliver terrible news. He kept glancing around the office like he was worried about being overheard, shifting his weight from foot to foot in obvious anxiety. "Hey man," he said, his voice pitched lower than usual. "I think you need to see this. I'm really sorry, but I think you need to see this right now." He handed me his phone, and my entire world collapsed in real time. There was Emma, in our apartment, in the bedroom we shared, recreating our proposal with exaggerated, mocking gestures that made me look like the biggest fool who'd ever lived. She was holding a ring pop, a fucking ring pop, and speaking in a deliberately goofy voice that was supposed to be me, Emma. "Will you marry me at this super original farmer's market because I'm so basic and think sunflowers are the height of romance?" Then she dropped the candy ring dramatically and rolled her eyes at the camera with the kind of contempt usually reserved for war criminals. "When he thinks a farmer's market is romantic, hashtag basic, hashtag cringe, hashtag yikes, hashtag should have seen this coming, hashtag dodged a bullet." The video had 2.3 million views, 450,000 likes, 16,000 shares. The comments were an avalanche of strangers dissecting every detail of my proposal, laughing at my generic location choice, mocking my nervousness in the photos that Emma had somehow obtained and posted alongside the video, analyzing my appearance with the kind of brutal honesty that the internet specializes in. This man really thought he did something special. The secondhand embarrassment is real. Imagine thinking a farmer's market is romantic in 2023. Someone needs to tell him about Google and how to plan an actual proposal. She deserves so much better than this basic energy. Why do men think the bare minimum is romantic? At least she said yes to his face before roasting him online. I sat at my desk, scrolling through hundreds of comments roasting the most vulnerable moment of my life, while my coworkers pretended not to stare, and my heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to escape from my chest. The engagement photos I'd paid for, the ones meant to capture our joy and love and the beginning of our future together, had been turned into evidence for the prosecution in the court of public opinion. That evening, I confronted Emma. She was lounging on our couch, scrolling through the comments on her video with obvious satisfaction, that little half-smile playing around her lips that meant she was particularly pleased with her own cleverness. When I said her name, she looked up with this bright, performative smile that I'd seen 1,000 times on her Instagram stories, but had somehow never recognized as completely artificial. Congratulations on going viral, I said, and her smile faltered for just a moment before snapping back into place. Oh, you saw that? Look, babe, it's just content. You're being way too sensitive about this. It's not personal. Not personal? Emma, you turned our engagement into a joke for millions of strangers. You made me look like an idiot in front of the entire internet. She sighed like I was being unreasonable, like I was the one with the problem. It's not that deep, David. People love this kind of content. It's relatable. Everyone's been in a relationship where their partner does something sweet but completely basic. My follower count has gone up by 10,000 since this morning, and brands are already reaching out about partnerships. So this was about followers, about money. Everything I do is about building my brand. You know that this is my career, my livelihood. I can't just post pretty pictures forever. I need content that actually resonates with people, that gets them talking and engaging. The casualness in her voice was what finally broke me. Not anger, not defensiveness, not even embarrassment. Just this matter-of-fact explanation that our most intimate moment was nothing more than raw material for her personal brand. Like she was explaining why she'd chosen one photo filter over another. I've been planning this for weeks, she continued, apparently taking my stunned silence as permission to explain her strategy. I could tell you were going to propose soon. You're not exactly subtle about this stuff. The ring shopping, the way you kept checking your phone for weather updates, that weird conversation with my sister about my favorite flowers. I knew it was coming, and I knew it would be basic as hell, so I started brainstorming content around it. Content around our engagement, around the breakup, actually. Proposal content is boring. Everyone does engagement announcements. But breakup content, especially breakup content where I'm the one with the moral high ground, that's where the real numbers are. The follow-up videos, the healing journey content, the brand partnerships with self-care companies. It's a whole series I've been planning. I stared at this woman I'd loved for 3 years, this woman I'd planned to spend my life with. This woman who was wearing my grandmother's ring while explaining how she'd monetized the destruction of our relationship, and realized I didn't know her at all. The Emma sitting in front of me was a complete stranger wearing my fiancé's face, speaking in her voice, but utterly devoid of anything that resembled the person I'd fallen in love with. You planned our breakup before I even proposed? I planned my content strategy. The breakup was inevitable once people saw how basic you are. She said it like she was explaining a simple business decision, like she was discussing the weather or what to have for dinner. Look at the comments, David. Everyone can see it. I deserve better than farmers market proposals and grandmother's rings. My audience expects me to have standards. My grandmother's ring. The ring that had been on my grandmother's finger for 62 years of marriage, through the Depression and World War II, and raising 5 children and building a life together that lasted until death actually did them part. The ring that represented more love and commitment and genuine partnership than Emma would ever understand or be capable of. So what happens now? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Now I create content about how I realized I was settling, how I deserve someone who puts actual effort into romance, how women need to stop accepting the bare minimum from men. It's going to be empowering content that really resonates with my female followers. And us? What about us? She looked at me like I'd asked the stupidest question in the world. There is no us, David. There hasn't been an us for a while now. This just makes it official. That night, I called my sister Sarah. She answered on the first ring, and I could hear the tears in my voice before I said a single word. I saw the video, she said immediately, her voice tight with anger and concern. I'm so sorry, David. Are you okay? Do you need me to come over? I wasn't okay. I was humiliated, heartbroken, and completely lost. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and rearranged all my organs while I was awake and watching. But talking to Sarah, and then to my parents, and then to my best friend Mike, I started to understand that this wasn't about my inadequacy or my failure as a romantic partner. This was about Emma's complete lack of character, her inability to see other people as anything more than props in her personal drama. She showed you who she really is, Mike said over beers that weekend, his jaw tight with the kind of protective anger that good friends feel when someone they care about gets hurt. She just saved you from marrying someone who would exploit your marriage, your kids, your entire fucking life for content. You dodged a bullet, man. A massive, life-destroying bullet. It doesn't feel like dodging a bullet when you're still bleeding from the wound, I said. That's because you're a good person who actually loved her. But think about it. If she could do this to you now, what would she have done to your children? Your wedding would have been content. Your honeymoon would have been content. Your kids' first steps, first words, first day of school, all of it would have been content. She would have monetized every meaningful moment of your life. He was right, of course. But knowing you've escaped a terrible fate doesn't immediately heal the damage from the escape itself. The video continued to spread like wildfire. Emma kept creating follow-up content, positioning herself as a victim of toxic masculinity and traditional gender expectations. She posted a series of videos about how proposals should be collaborative and creative, how men need to do better when it comes to romance, how women shouldn't settle for partners who don't understand their worth. She shared screenshots of messages from followers thanking her for keeping it real about modern dating. She posted about the importance of maintaining standards and not accepting bare minimum energy from romantic partners. She even did a live Q&A about red flags in relationships where she used examples from our 3 years together, painting me as controlling, unimaginative, and emotionally stunted. Her follower count exploded. She went from 15,000 followers to over 100,000 in less than a week. Brand partnerships started rolling in like slot machine payouts. Jewelry companies wanting her to review engagement rings and wedding bands. Dating apps wanting her to partner with them on authentic love campaigns. Self-care and empowerment brands capitalizing on her journey of self-discovery and choosing herself. Meanwhile, I became accidentally internet famous for all the wrong reasons. Strangers recognized me on the street and at coffee shops, sometimes pointing and whispering, sometimes approaching me directly with a mixture of pity and curiosity. My LinkedIn was flooded with connection requests from people who'd seen the video and wanted to know if I was that guy from TikTok. Coworkers gave me sympathetic looks in the hallway and asked if I was doing okay in voices reserved for people who'd survived natural disasters. I deleted all my social media accounts, but the damage was done. Emma had made me internet famous for being heartbroken, for being naive enough to think that someone who loved me wouldn't exploit my vulnerability for entertainment. I'd become a cautionary tale, a punchline, a symbol of everything pathetic about modern romance. The legal consultation was brief and depressing. The lawyer, a kind woman in her 50s who seemed genuinely sympathetic to my situation, explained the harsh realities of social media law with the patience of someone who'd had this conversation many times before. She technically has the right to post about her own life and experiences, she said, spreading out some documents that might as well have been written in ancient Sanskrit for all the sense they made to me. The photos were taken in public. You weren't married, so there's no expectation of privacy, and satire is protected speech under the First Amendment. You could try arguing invasion of privacy or intentional infliction of emotional distress, but it would be an expensive uphill battle that would probably just generate more attention and more content for her to profit from. The legal system, designed for a world where people's private humiliations stayed private, had no meaningful recourse for someone whose intimate moment had been weaponized for viral content. I could spend thousands of dollars and months of my life fighting a case I probably wouldn't win, all while Emma continued to profit from the attention the lawsuit would generate. I decided not to pursue it. I didn't want to give Emma more content to work with, more opportunities to position herself as the victim of a vindictive ex-boyfriend who couldn't handle her success. Besides, I was emotionally exhausted. The betrayal had taken everything out of me, and I barely had the energy to get through each day, let alone fight a legal battle against someone who'd already proven she had no limits when it came to exploiting our relationship. The worst part was the gradual revelation of just how calculated and premeditated it all had been. Going through her social media history, I found evidence that she'd been planning this for months. Screenshots of conversations with friends about milking the engagement for content that they'd accidentally left visible in Instagram stories. Research into viral breakup strategies and authenticity in influencer relationships in her browser history. She'd even created a content calendar around our relationship's demise, mapping out posting schedules and engagement strategies. Everything I'd thought was real, every sweet moment, every intimate conversation, every expression of love, had been performance. I'd been dating an actress who saw me as a supporting character in her personal brand narrative, someone whose only value was in how effectively I could be used to generate sympathetic content for her audience. The relationship I'd thought was built on mutual love and respect and shared dreams for the future had actually been a 3-year audition for the role of disappointing ex-boyfriend in the Emma show. And I'd failed even at that, because my disappointment wasn't dramatic enough, my heartbreak wasn't entertaining enough, my proposal wasn't bad enough to justify the level of public humiliation she'd subjected me to. I hit rock bottom about a month after the video went viral. Depression had settled in like fog rolling off the ocean, making everything gray and distant and impossibly heavy. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep more than a couple hours at a time, couldn't imagine ever trusting anyone again or believing that love could be anything other than performance and exploitation. I'd become a cautionary tale about modern dating, a victim of the attention economy, a data point in the growing trend of people monetizing their most intimate moments for strangers' entertainment. The worst part was feeling like I'd somehow deserved it, like I should have known better, like I was stupid for believing that someone who performed their entire life for an audience might have genuine private moments with me. It was my grandfather who pulled me out of it. He came to visit one evening, Found me on the couch in 3-day-old clothes, surrounded by empty takeout containers and the general debris of someone who'd stopped caring about basic human maintenance. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me with the kind of patient silence that only comes with age and wisdom. "Tell me about the ring," he said finally. I explained how I'd had his mother's diamond reset, how I'd wanted to combine family history with Emma's modern aesthetic preferences, how I'd thought it was perfect, how I'd been so proud to continue the tradition, how I'd imagined that ring staying in our family for generations to come. "Your grandmother would have loved that," he said, his voice soft with memory. "She always said the setting didn't matter, it was the promise that counted, the commitment behind it. But you know what she would have loved even more?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. "That this girl showed you her true colors before you married her. Grandma was practical like that. She would have said Emma did you a favor, saved you from a lifetime of heartache and betrayal. Better to learn someone's character before you're legally bound to them than after." He was right, of course. Emma had revealed herself completely, had saved me from a lifetime of being exploited for content, from having my children. Milestones turned into monetizable moments, from living in a relationship where every intimate moment was potential material for public consumption. But knowing you've dodged a bullet doesn't stop the impact from feeling like a direct hit. The turning point came when I started receiving messages from strangers. Not the cruel commenters who'd mocked my proposal, but people who'd had similar experiences with partners who'd exploited their relationships for social media content. Men and women who'd discovered that their most vulnerable moments had been turned into entertainment without their consent. "Thank you for not fighting back publicly," one woman wrote. "My ex-boyfriend created a whole YouTube series about our breakup, complete with reaction videos to my responses and analysis of our text message conversations. Watching you take the high road has given me strength to do the same thing and not give him more content to profit from." Another message came from a man whose wife had live-tweeted their marriage counseling sessions, turning their attempts to save their relationship into real-time entertainment for her followers. A woman whose ex had posted intimate photos and videos of their relationship on Instagram after their breakup, claiming it was art and storytelling. I realized I wasn't alone in this new kind of betrayal that our hyper-connected world had made possible. Emma wasn't some unique monster. She was part of a whole ecosystem of people who'd learned to monetize intimacy, to treat relationships as content opportunities rather than human connections, to value engagement metrics over actual emotional engagement. I started volunteering with a digital rights organization that helped people navigate online harassment and privacy violations. It gave me purpose, a way to transform my humiliation into something useful and meaningful. I spoke at conferences about consent in the digital age, about the ethics of relationship content, about the difference between sharing your life authentically and exploiting it for profit. The work was healing in ways I hadn't expected. Helping other people who'd been victimized by their partner's social media ambitions made me feel less alone, less like a singular fool who'd been uniquely stupid enough to fall for someone like Emma. It also helped me understand that what had happened to me wasn't just personal drama. It was part of a larger cultural shift toward treating privacy and intimacy as commodities to be traded for attention and profit. Ironically, Emma's content empire began to crumble around the same time I was finding my footing again. Other ex-boyfriends started coming forward with similar stories, revealing a pattern of exploiting relationships for content that became impossible for her audience to ignore. Her carefully curated image as an authentic, empowered woman was exposed as a carefully constructed persona designed to generate sympathy and engagement. The first crack in her facade came when her college ex-boyfriend posted a response video detailing how she'd manipulated him into participating in elaborate couple challenges and relationship goals content, only to dump him the moment her follower count reached a certain threshold. Then her high school boyfriend shared screenshots of conversations where she'd admitted to dating him primarily for homecoming and prom content. Her comment sections turned toxic as people began to realize she was a serial manipulator who viewed romantic partners as content creation tools rather than human beings. Brands started dropping her as the pattern of exploitation became undeniable. Her engagement rates plummeted as audiences grew tired of the manufactured drama and obvious manipulation. She tried to rebrand as a relationship expert and dating coach, but the internet has a long memory for this kind of thing. The woman who'd built her following on supposedly authentic vulnerability was exposed as someone who'd never been vulnerable or authentic a single day in her life. Every relationship, every emotional moment, every expression of love had been calculated for maximum social media impact. I felt no satisfaction in her downfall. By the time her career imploded, I'd moved past anger and resentment into something closer to pity. Emma had chosen a life where every genuine moment was filtered through the lens of potential content, where every relationship was evaluated based on its social media potential rather than its emotional value. She'd never actually experienced the thing she'd been performing for years: real love, real intimacy, real human connection. Meeting Sarah happened naturally, the way genuinely good things tend to happen when you're finally ready for them and not desperately trying to force them into existence. She was a librarian who'd never heard of Emma, had never seen the viral video, and didn't care about my accidental internet infamy when she eventually learned about it. She kept her phone in her purse during dinner and asked questions about my work, my family, my thoughts on books and movies and life. Not because she was gathering material for content, but because she was genuinely interested in who I was as a person. Our relationship developed in blessed obscurity, without documentation or performance, or any thought of how it would play to an audience. We had real conversations about real things. We shared actual intimate moments that belonged entirely to us. We built inside jokes and private traditions that existed nowhere but in our shared memory. When she eventually learned about the Emma situation months into our relationship, her response was perfect in its simplicity and understanding. "That must have been really painful. I'm glad you got away from someone who could treat you like that." She didn't ask to see the video. She didn't want details about what had happened or how it had felt to be humiliated so publicly. She didn't try to analyze Emma's motivations or psychoanalyze what the experience meant about my character or my judgment. She just acknowledged that it had been painful and expressed genuine relief that I'd escaped from someone capable of such cruelty. A year later, when I proposed to Sarah in her favorite independent bookstore after closing time, surrounded by nothing but dusty shelves and warm lamplight, and the comfortable silence that only comes from being completely alone with someone you love, she said yes and then kissed me without a single thought of documentation or social media or how the moment would play to an audience. No cameras, no performance, no content strategy. Just two people choosing each other in a moment that belonged entirely to us, witnessed only by fictional characters on book spines, and the quiet dignity of a space devoted to storytelling and human connection. Emma's career never recovered from the exposure of her pattern of exploitation. Last I heard, she was working in marketing for a small startup, her social media presence reduced to the kind of generic lifestyle content that generates no real engagement. The woman who'd built her brand on exploiting intimate relationships had ended up alone, her capacity for genuine connection permanently damaged by years of treating love as performance art. I don't follow her anymore, don't check up on her, don't wish her ill or well. I've learned that the best revenge is building a life so full and satisfying that your past pain becomes just that, past, a chapter in your story rather than the defining narrative of your entire existence. Sometimes people still recognize me, though it's increasingly rare as the internet's attention span moves on to newer outrages and fresher content. When it does come up, I've learned to respond with a simple truth that serves both as explanation and closure. That experience taught me the difference between love and performance. I'm grateful for the lesson, even though it was incredibly painful at the time. The truth is, Emma did me a favor in the most brutal way possible. She revealed herself completely before I'd made any permanent commitments. Before we'd bought a house together or gotten married or brought children into a relationship built on exploitation and manipulation. She showed me what a relationship looks like when one person sees the other as content rather than as a human being deserving of respect and privacy. She taught me to value authentic connection over performed intimacy, to recognize the difference between someone who shares their life with you and someone who shares you with their audience. She helped me understand that real love happens in the spaces between social media posts, in the moments too precious and private to be monetized. My grandmother's ring sits on Sarah's finger now, where it belongs and where it will stay. The setting is different. Sarah chose something vintage and simple that suits her infinitely better than Emma's modern preferences ever could have. But the diamond is the same, carrying the same promise it carried for my grandparents through 62 years of genuine partnership, that love is something you do consistently and privately, not something you perform for applause. We're planning our wedding for next spring, a small ceremony with family and close friends who love us for who we are, rather than for the content we might generate. No professional photographers beyond the basic documentation that any wedding deserves. No social media strategy or hashtag campaigns. No live streaming or real-time updates or audience participation. Just two people making promises to each other in front of the people who matter most, creating a memory that will live in our hearts and in the hearts of the people who witness it, rather than in the phones and feeds of strangers looking for entertainment. Sometimes I think about posting our engagement announcement or wedding photos just to complete the narrative arc for anyone still following my story from the viral video days. But then I remember that the best love stories aren't meant for public consumption. They're meant to be lived quietly and fully by the people brave enough to choose genuine connection over social media validation. Emma taught me that some betrayals are actually gifts in disguise, harsh lessons that redirect your life towards something better than what you thought you wanted. When someone shows you who they really are, when they choose views over love, engagement metrics over emotional engagement, performance over authenticity, believe them the first time. And then thank them for showing you what you don't want, and go find what you do. The internet never forgets, but I've learned something more important. The people who matter will remember the right things. They'll remember your character, your resilience, your capacity to love again after being betrayed so publicly and completely. They'll remember that you chose grace over revenge, growth over bitterness, authentic connection over viral fame. And in the end, that's the only audience that really matters. That's the only story worth telling. That's the only love worth having. The kind that happens when no one is watching, when there's no profit to be made, when the only reward is the simple, profound joy of being genuinely known and loved by another human being. Emma may have gotten her viral moment, her temporary fame, her brief career boost built on the wreckage of our relationship. But I got something infinitely more valuable: the knowledge of what real love looks like, and the wisdom to recognize it when it finally comes along.